So, Tim, could you go ahead and start by introducing yourself?
Sure. My name is Tim Frick. I am the founder and CEO of Mightybytes, which is a digital agency located in Chicago. We started in early 1998, so we're just going into our 22nd year. We are a certified B Corp, and we work primarily with mission-driven organizations such as nonprofits and certified B Corps and other organizations that are looking to make positive change happen. And we typically do that through design, technology, and digital marketing practices.
Okay. I see. I know that you studied film as an undergraduate student. How did you make a leap from film to interactive media?
It was kind of made for me. I was on this track to be a you know filmmaker, and I was working in news for the kind of some specialty topics, and so I was kind of going on this documentary filmmaker, news journalist kind of track. And when the internet happened, I took to the tools that are that at the time were around to build that, and I was excited by the promise of what it could do and how it could potentially change the way that we communicate. And as a storyteller at heart, I was really interested in using that new medium as kind of a way to push new ideas forward and get them to potentially broader audience.
Yeah.
So it was a natural migration, but it was also really exciting, time to be doing that kind of stuff because there was opportunity everywhere. Not all of it good, but opportunity everywhere.
Right. I don't want to get too far off topic, but I'm assuming. I mean, I've been making websites about that long as well, and I've seen so much change
Oh my
happen.
God, yeah.
What are some of the biggest changes that you've seen over the last 20 something years?
I think there has been this race towards the new hotness, whatever that is, that I think has accelerated over the last 20 years. I think that, people are migrate to, like, when we first started doing work, it was like, we have to do interactive multimedia, and then it was, we want to do Shockwave, and then it was Flash. We want to do Flash. Everything has to be Flash, Flash, Flash. And so it was, well, we were positioning ourselves as people who can help you tell a more compelling story. The tools that we were using, the kind of drive that was getting us towards that kind of stuff was like, oh, well, there would be like almost requirements in early projects of like, do you have Flash, or do you have this technology, or do that? Do you do now? It's more like, do you develop in WordPress, or do you develop in Drupal, or what platforms do you use? I think I've seen that accelerate rapidly with the creation of low end platforms like Wix, Squarespace, and all of that kind of stuff that give, on one hand, give everybody the power to create their own story, which is really exciting. On the other hand, it has also been a race to mediocrity in terms of quality of deliverables and content and quality of a lot of things. So the signal to noise ratio has exponentially skyrocketed, and I think that it's just even in the past few years, it's just like the hockey stick of just going racing up. And so you look at something like content marketing, which maybe 10 years ago was like, cool, you can, publish instantly on the internet. Awesome. Now it's like the glut of content that's out there makes it really hard for you to find quality stuff that answers the questions that you have.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that is encouraging in terms of access to information. It's also, I'm a stickler for high quality and have been throughout the work that we do as a company. So it's a kind of a double-edged sword. It's great that people have access to all these kinds of tools. It's challenging when that results in a lot of kind of unsustainable practices on the internet, which I don't this is probably not relevant to what we're writing about, but it has a larger environmental impact in the airline industry. So, all of that content and all of those pixels add up, and so there's a whole. So our big thing for the last few years has been about sustainable web design, which is about thinking through a lot of these things to make sure that you're reaching your target market, you're providing them something as quickly as possible, using as few resources to do it, and that it's directly aligned with what they're looking for. So a whole kind of level of sustainable design practices associated with creating web
Um,
That might be a little off topic.
Yeah, no, that's okay. That's okay. I'm just going back to my notes here. So you, I know a little bit about this, but can you talk a little bit about the types of projects you do that are considered interactive?
Sure. Sure. Yeah. I mean, I would say the majority of them are website redesigns for mission-driven organizations. So it could be for us. We have a kind of broad terminology for what consists of a mission-driven organization. We do tons of work in the education arena. So lots of work with publishers and universities, and K-12 publishers, etc. Just those organizations alone have very different needs when it comes to like a website redesign. A publisher might be trying to sell products. A university might be trying to increase enrollment. So our goal is always to get to the heart of what the business's goals are and where do we create that Venn diagram that dovetails with what the user's needs are.
Okay.
And putting a lot of strategy into making sure that user needs and business goals are aligned.
I know you mentioned that you get your projects from a lot of different ways, just public speaking, and you're an author yourself, and people know who you are. But do you have any strategies when it comes to proposal writing? If you were to advise someone on writing a good proposal, what would be?
That's quite an art of writing of proposals. I think that it's important to make sure that you're really clear about what is being asked of you. So, don't just memorize and spit back what someone says they're looking for, but in turn, interpret that in a way that you think is going to be most useful for them, and showing clearly, as clearly as you can, step by step, how you would actually bring that to life. I think that more than anything, it may seem really basic, but I think a lot of companies get wrapped up in our process this and we do it this way, and it's all about us, and it's really less about going through and saying specifically how you're going to address the challenges of whatever client you're talking with has.
Right.
So being as specific as possible, but also I think hand in hand with that, being as flexible as possible, because no plan survives first contact with the enemy. You know what I mean? Like if you overplan everything up front, like we don't want our proposals to be 37-page volumes. We want our proposals to be succinct and clear and easy to understand and engaging, and have the clients understand that we are flexible enough to roll with changes that come along, because any project has a continuous learning curve.
What kind of questions do you like to have answered before you get started?
The basics: timeline, budget, goals. Like just having that first conversation about what they're looking to accomplish, why they're looking to accomplish it, and then in what timeline and budget they want to do that. That just helps us very quickly figure out if we're aligned. And making sure we'll do a little bit of research ahead of time on the organization. If a new organization comes to us, we, as a certified B Corp, we typically focus our work on mission-driven organizations. We've had like fracking companies call us, for instance, where we're super green and super environmental in our messaging, and fracking isn't.
Yeah.
So we just politely decline that work and say it's probably just not a good fit. But like being able to have that qualifying conversation up front is really important, because then we're not wasting our time answering RFPs or putting proposals together for clients that just aren't going to be a good fit.
Okay. What about any strategies for creating a budget? When you budget out a project, do you typically budget by, task and hour and rate, or how do you usually do it?
Yeah, I have an entire blog post dedicated to this that I'll share with you.
Oh, good. Okay.
Because I put a lot, probably more than anything in this. Because agencies have all kinds of different ways that they charge for their time, and that they put kind of project estimates together and stuff. We're lucky, given that we're going into our 22nd year. We have reams of past project data that we can go back and be like, based on how the client is explaining this, it sounds like it's a very similar challenge to this project, and this project had this budget, and it took this long to do. maybe it's not an apples to apples comparison, but you can make some assumptions that at least help you and your potential client get in the same ballpark when you're starting to talk about like what is it that you're trying to accomplish, and being able to provide them with empirical data that says this project had this timeline and this budget, and that helps them because oftentimes they have two things that are going on the client side. They have a project with a bunch of goals, and then they probably have a company budget that this is a line item on. And so they know what they have to spend, but they don't want to spend every dime of that on the build and then not have any time to actually improve it over time. So just helping them get clarity around how to manage that and how to make the best out of their project budget. We're really big fans of ruthless prioritization and then reprioritization throughout a project.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll go through and we'll kind of assess risk and value of all the desired things that people want, because you can do anything on a website,
right?
And people often do, and
yeah.
It usually leads to terrible websites. And so I mentioned the Venn diagram earlier of like user wants and business goals. We dovetail that with desired features and priorities. So like we'll out of the gate, we'll start working on the highest value deliverables first, the things that are going to be most expensive, take the most time, provide the most value to the organization, and help them get that much closer to solving their problems as quickly as possible, because that means we can maximize the budget on the most important stuff. And then if we nail that, get that down, we can make some, have some conversations about, well, do we need to reprioritize what's left based on what we've learned throughout this first process? So, ongoing reporting and conversations, open, transparent conversations, dialogue with the clients about that is really important.
Okay. What about during the planning phase? I know you typically work with a team of quite a few individuals. How many people are usually on a project team? And I guess let's just start with that. So let's say you get a new project. Who would be typically on the team?
So at the very least, you have a designer, a developer, and a project manager.
Mm-hmm.
And then depending on the nature of the project, if it's a digital product that isn't super content heavy, that might be enough for a team. But if it's many of our clients have websites that have tens of thousands of pages. And so one of the big challenges with those kind of websites is doing the information architecture in an intuitive and easy to understand way, with lots of taxonomy and lots of complicated, ways to cross-reference information. So if it's one of those kind of projects, we could also bring in a content strategist, specifically to make sure that we kind of, nail assumptions about the information architecture. And then, our designers would work on doing, user research and user testing to make sure that our assumptions that we, made in that process actually resonate with the users. So the user testing and research is a big part of our process for that. If it's a large project, we have multiple designers and multiple developers involved. But the flow of information typically goes through one project manager for the life cycle of the client relationship, just because we found, there's one person on their end that we connect with, and they have one person on our end to connect with, and it helps, streamline the communication, and you don't not playing the game of phone tag or something.
Right. Once the project gets going, what kind of design documents do you use in your process so that everybody on the team knows what they're talking about, and in terms of communicating what you're doing with the client as well?
Sure. The answer to that, unfortunately, is a consultant's answer. It kind of depends on the project,
mm-hmm.
But given, let's just say there's two example projects: a large content strategy project, a website with lots of content, and a digital product that, say for instance, a beach cleanup app or recycling app on your phone or something like that. That may not be super content heavy, but is dependent on users doing tasks, like specifically going this step and this step and this step. For a project like that, we'll make sure that we're, doing user research and testing our assumptions with the users as much as possible. But we'll also do like user flows, like kind of journey maps of like the user should go from this page to this page to this page. We'll put together some wireframes and some, of the components or the content patterns for that. And much of that is done in a workshop setting with our clients. We found that helps us build consensus faster. co-create more quickly and get approvals on things more quickly. And so we're all about doing a lot of workshops and making sure that process moves things forward quickly, and even on a content, with a heavy content project where we might do a lot of card sorting exercises and we might, work out a lot of taxonomy issues and making sure that we understand user journeys through different kinds of contents and making sure that they're able to easily find what it is that they're looking for. We might use like true testing on that for testing to say, hey, user, go find this piece of content on the existing site. And then, we'll have 20 people go and do that, and we'll track their path to get to where we think they need to go. Optimal workshops, TrueJack is a great tool for figuring out user paths through content and stuff like that. So, we'll do some of that kind of stuff. It again depends on the nature of the project. Our process is flexible enough to allow for integration of these different kinds of tools or approaches, but kind of rigid enough that there's the steps are pretty natural in the way that they go.
Right. Okay, so after the design phase, some of this is an aside. Some of your answers are somewhat reassuring. So I'm like, okay, all right, good. We're on the same page here. I have my students use the optimal sort to do a card sort and a reverse sort in my information architecture class, and it's pretty cool.
Yes, it's some really great stuff.
Yeah,
I would say, I wouldn't say design phase necessarily. For us, design and development are as iterative as they can be. Everybody kind of works in the same room, and so the idea being that if you have people working in these sprints, these kind of cyclical sprints, you can get consensus from the team. Whether it's an internal sprint that people are working on, or if we're doing a design sprint or something with a client where they're actually co-creating with us. That consensus building process of getting approvals and moving forward, we found just helps projects move forward more quickly, which is why we don't, do the design, lob it over a wall, do the development.
Right.
Making sure that those kinds of processes are cyclical.
Right. Okay. Sorry, just let's just finish talking about the process here. What once you roll it out, is there do you have any specific process about kind of like doing a soft launch or?
Sure. Yeah. I would say we have kind of two kind of projects in that realm. Some it makes sense to just go all the way through to a launch and launch a big fat grand site and say, okay, this new site is launched. Some it makes sense to either make some tweaks to what is there or to do a light launch or a soft launch of something so that you can actually pull user data in. And you do a soft launch and you track that. And the nice thing about a launched product is that you actually can get the real data of your users interacting with it, and you can make some educated decisions on how to improve that moving forward. So, depending on the client's needs and what they're looking for, we'll advise on one of those two approaches. Either way, we still recommend to our clients that they, once they launch something, that they consider, kind of long-term optimization process. Some of that might be search engine optimization where you're just trying to drive more qualified traffic to your site, but some of it might literally be like we launched this thing and turns out there's 3 extra steps in the form that we don't need. And if we remove those steps, we're not going to have as much of a drop off in our funnel. We're going to have more users going through the completion. So it's doing that kind of an ongoing optimization based on test results and ongoing testing that helps you, increase conversions and better meet your goals with the digital content.
What about hosting? Do you guys provide, this sort of a technical question, but do you guys provide hosting for your clients, or do you put them somewhere else?
So we've taken both approaches. I think my last book was called Designing for Sustainability, and the impetus for creating that was really because we wanted to, as a B Corp, we were really about the environment, and so we wanted to make sure that our client sites were hosted by renewable energy, powered by renewable energy. So we started working with all of the renewable energy hosts and found out that not a lot of them were very great.
Mm-hmm.
And so we kind of, after that, it was like a several year long process where we were working with all of these smaller green hosts and what they had in renewable energy, they didn't in customer service and uptime and stability and all that kind of stuff. And so we decided that we were going to migrate them over to Google Cloud Platform because Google is the largest non-utility investor in renewable energy in the world. And so we figured that would be, even though it's, we wanted to support a small company as a small company ourselves, the reality is when it comes to renewable energy, it is typically the big companies that have the resources to do that. So we've recently migrated from Google Cloud Platform to Pantheon, which is a hosting provider that kind of sits on top of Google Cloud Platform. So we can say that we're using renewable energy powered hosting, but the platform that we use in Pantheon has a lot more bells and whistles that allows us to more easily manage kind of the client's hosting environment and basically the bells and whistles of their website.
And do you do primarily WordPress development, or do you do?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
We were a WordPress and Drupal shop for years. In fact, we sponsored Drupal Camp here in Chicago, and we were big proponents of that. But it got to a point where, as a small agency, trying to manage both of those, like the skill sets were so different and the kinds of development needs they had, and so we ended up in 2011, I think it was, we dropped Drupal and decided to focus specifically on WordPress.
Okay.
So we've been mostly for that kind of stuff on WordPress.
Okay, got it. Do you do anything with WooCommerce?
We have. We actually created the world's first B-Corp store, and it was the purpose of it was like the world's first store you could buy only from B-Corps, like showcasing B-Corp products. And we decided it was going to be an excuse for the company to learn e-commerce because we didn't have a lot of that experience. And so since we're a WordPress shop, we naturally decided that WooCommerce would be a good platform to learn on. And so we built the B-Corp store on WooCommerce. Definitely found out its limitations.
Yeah.
Stuff there, but we found out pretty quickly there was a lot of things we couldn't do.
Yeah.
Without breaking it. Yeah.
It's still pretty phenomenal. I mean, I've built e-commerce sites from scratch, and to see what WooCommerce can do right out of the for free, it's amazing.
No, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. You talked a little bit about usability testing, like the example that you mentioned about noticing that your like a form taking too long, or do you have a specific process for that, or how do you monitor these things after a launch to determine something's working or something's not working?
So we do three kinds of user testing: qualitative, quantitative, and behavioral. And so on the qualitative side, it's usually interviews and kind of getting personal feedback from real people. On the quantitative side, we'll use a platform like Google Analytics or Concura or Hotjar or Crazy Egg or any number, depending on what it is you're trying to accomplish. We'll use a specific kind of tool to kind of track what a large number of users are doing on a specific page. Like, are they actually scrolling all the way to the bottom and reading the whole thing? Are they actually clicking on the call to action on whatever page? And is that actually, when they click on that call to action, does it actually lead to a conversion once they get to whatever's next? So it's really about tracking conversions and figuring out where in the process you can make changes and tweaks to optimize the process and reach better goals, higher conversion rates and such.
And is that typically part of the project proposal to do that part of the testing?
It's part of the proposal. Oftentimes we don't assign like a budget because usually you have to have something to launch. So what we'll do is we'll say, when we launch, we're going to have a conversation about this, and we'll talk about what it could mean for the next 9 months of your site or whatever year of your site. Our primary proposal, our first proposal that a client usually gets, is typically for a website redesign, and then we'll have a bunch of options for improving and optimizing.
Okay, got it.
They understand we do that.
Okay, I think this might be one of my last questions. You mentioned the people that you try to hire to work with your company. People who are good at their craft, can meet deadlines. Anything specific, like a field of study or any specific experience that you look for when you're trying to get people to be part of your, to join the team?
Sure, I definitely look for good problem solving skills. I like to ask questions in interviews about like what was the hairiest situation that you've been in, and what was the creative solution that you used to get out of that
Mm-hmm.
situation. So I think given what we do involves so much problem solving, making sure someone has problem solving skills in general, whether they're a designer or a developer. I mean, I would imagine you can't be a decent designer in 2019 without having some really good problem solving skills. So that's definitely a must for us. As I said in that email that I sent to you, you can train skills. Like I can train someone how to use InVision or Sketch or whatever. Um, it's harder to train them up on kind of creativity and innovation and creative thought process and creative problem solving processes and stuff like that. So I definitely look for that. I'm I'm a writer myself, so I also really appreciate anyone who can write. Because that means they are able to communicate well, which means the projects that they're on are going to be able to go more smoothly. So whether it's verbal communication or written communication, given that a lot of work we do these days is virtual, written communication might play more of a role. But in verbal communication, like facilitation skills, because we do so many workshops, being able to do that, or seeing them in action, or asking questions about their skill set on that is also really important.
Got it. Um, any skills you think are particularly hard to find?
It's taken us a long time to find developers in the past. I think that's because of the market. I think that there are a lot of developer jobs out there, and it's kind of an esoteric skill set, and there's so many different kinds of development that you can do. So to have a specific like ramp stack, WordPress developer skill set, we've definitely found that's a harder role to fill. Um, many developers want to work on their own and not necessarily be part of a larger team. So that can be a challenge as well. So I would say that's probably one of the most challenging
Mm-hmm.
to find. And I also would say we lean a lot on our product managers here, because they are the liaison between clients and our team. And so it can be hard to find a good, well-rounded PM to kind of manage that process, because you have to have all kinds of interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary skill sets in order to make that really work. You
Right.
know,
So, what do you think is fun about this field, being in this business?
I like the variety. I think the variety of like always having new challenges and new problems to solve. It can get really exciting. Uh, I like that it's always evolving. Design, especially in the last 15, 20 years, has evolved so much. It's been so insane to see the role design plays in pretty much everything. And that design can, in and of itself, can be a business strategy. Whereas if you would have told me that when I was in grad school, I would have been like, "What?"
Uh-huh.
Design is colors and type and fonts and layouts and that kind of stuff. And now it's really about creative problem solving. You know,
Right.
um, so that's been very exciting. And
I think it's interesting how Airbnb was developed and the whole I founded by designers, and we have rental property. I use it all the time, and I you can tell it is their business strategy. It is just so easy to use, and being able to do everything through my phone so easily, and everything
yep,
works so smoothly, and just the help area. It is a very well designed product that makes the business work. I think.
for sure.
I
Yeah,
mean,
I
if you think of
completely
like
agree.
Uber, same thing. It's about the design of the product that makes the business work.
Yeah, and I think that kind of touching back to your last question. Because we work with so many mission-driven organizations who are often resource constrained, and let's be frank, the nonprofit sector is usually 5 years behind the business sector in pretty much everything.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really exciting to help those organizations, kind of get onboarded with what good design is, and they might initially bristle because it's more expensive. It doesn't have to be necessarily. It depends on the use case, but seeing their eyes light up when they actually see the result of you know pay attention to good design practices and putting a good product out there that actually does what it's supposed to do and is easy to use.
Yeah.
And then it actually directly impacts them, how many donations they get or how they change the world, depending on whatever their organization.
That's cool. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, my pleasure. If you need me to clarify anything or whatever, just reach out.
I will. I'll transcribe the audio. I might have a couple of questions here and there, and I'll definitely send you
talk a little fast.
Yeah, that's good. I'm all about efficiency. I'll send you a copy of the book.
Awesome. I would love that. That'd be great.
Thanks, Tim. Talk to you later. Okay, bye.
Take care.
You
Bye-bye.
too.